Chapter 1351. When Sherpu's name was called, he immediately knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, this old subject is guilty. This old subject deserves 10,000 deaths. Zhu Qiyu frowned when he didn't even say anything. Why did Sherpu have such an attitude? Zhu Qiyu frowned, but the other party quickly gave him an answer. Your Majesty, a 5-star military fire weapon is so powerful that it's not something we can compare with. In terms of firearms alone, we're not their match at all. Sherpu almost cried for real. It was evident that he knew his weapon was inferior to the other parties. Speaking of which, compared to the technology and weapons brought by Yang Chendong, it would be more shocking if the Ministry of Works could produce similar products. Sherpu was naturally aware of this point. Afraid that he would be punished for this, he took the initiative to bring it up. His kneeling caused Zhu Qiyu to lose the idea of asking him for a plan. This kind of person was already frightened by the 5-star army. Could he still rely on him to come up with any good ideas? Shaking his head, Zhu Qiyu wanted to call for another minister. But at this time, the Crown Prince's junior tutor, Grand Scholar and Minister of Justice, Su Yozhen, spoke without being asked. Your Majesty, this subject believes that it will be difficult to solve the siege of Lu City. Finally, someone took the initiative to speak. Zhu Qiyu was happy in his heart. When he looked at Su Yozhen, his tone became much gentler. Beloved official Su, please continue. Yes. Su Yozhen cupped his fists with a solemn expression. Your Majesty, the bravery of the 5-star army is unimaginable. With their firearms, I'm afraid that by the time the memorial reaches the capital would have already fallen into their hands. For a city that has already been conquered, it would be useless no matter how much effort we put in. Rather than this, why not place the all-encompassing department on the front lines and increase the number of troops there while considering the matter of negotiating with the 5-star army? No tribute, no land, no reparations, no political marriages, and no titles of kings with different surnames. These were the Great Ming's strength of character. It was a pity that after the Great Ming divided the South, its strength was not as strong as before. Many rules had also changed. Let's talk about not being conferred the title of king. Where did Bugnam of Gojoseon come from? Since he had already broken the ancestral rules, what harm was there in breaking a few more? This was what Su Yozhen meant when she proposed to negotiate with the 5-star army. After saying all this, he took a step back. He knew that some things needed to be considered. The more he said before that, the more mistakes he would make. Sure enough, when Zhu Qiyu heard that they were going to negotiate with the 5-star army, her face became very ugly. An ominous glint flashed in his eyes, representing the anger in his heart. As the saying goes, if the monarch is humiliated, his subjects will die. However, when he looked at the other 5 ministers, their expressions didn't change at all. It was as if Su Yozhen's words were nothing out of the ordinary. The hall fell into silence once more, and only the sound of Zhu Qiyu's heavy breathing could be heard. Zhu Qiyu was originally an ambitious emperor. Ever since he took the position, he had been diligent in government affairs. It could be seen from the fact that he had less than 6 hours of rest every day. Unfortunately, one of the biggest lies in the world was that if you worked hard, you would succeed. This was because many people were indeed very capable, but they always lacked a bit of luck or talent. In the end, their wishes didn't come true. Zhu Qiyu belonged to the type of people who were very unlucky. Not to mention that in history, he was overturned by Zhu Qizhen. Just the fact that he met Yang Chendong in this life had already determined his fate. No matter how hard he worked, he wouldn't be able to unify the Great Ming. The result of his hard work was that Baiming would be destroyed a little later than usual. With the difficulty in front of him, Zhu Qiyu naturally didn't want to lower his head. However, reality was so cruel. The 5-star army was so powerful. If he still stubbornly insisted on going against the 5-star army, he might even lose his family fortune. He might even lose the throne. This situation was so big that he had to consider it carefully. Could he really afford to gamble? He had the heart to kill the enemy, but he was powerless to reverse the situation. This sentence was the most appropriate to describe Zhu Qiyu. When a person's strength wasn't strong, even if they were angry, they couldn't do anything. Moreover, if one wanted to achieve great things, they couldn't let their emotions affect their decisions. Thinking about Bai Ming's current situation, even if he wanted to mobilize the army, it would take time. Moreover, their fighting strength was so weak that even Zhu Qiyu didn't have confidence. In the end, after a long sigh, Zhu Qiyu's mood began to stabilize again. Su Yozhen, who had been secretly observing, saw that Zhu Qiyu's mood was gradually stabilizing. She took a small step forward and said, "Your Majesty, a little impatience spoils great plans." Su Yozhen's actions were just to give Zhu Qiyu a way out. After hearing this, Zhu Qiyu sighed and said, "That's right. Beloved official Su is right. The strength of the 5-star army isn't something we can fight against without making preparations. Since it's like this, let's talk with them. Didn't they say they wanted 1,000,000 commoners last time? Let's discuss this matter and see if it can be done." Although it was a question, the fact that Zhu Qiyu was able to say these words already proved that he approved of this proposal. Otherwise, why would he casually mention it? It had to be said that the so-called commoners in the eyes of the emperor mostly referred to the commoners that could be seen. For example, the officials in the palace hall, as well as the gentry and nobles who could submit memorials from time to time. After all, the emperor lived in the palace all year round. What was the outside world like? How were the commoners living? All of this was nothing more than hearsay, and a basic impression he got from reading the memorials. Most of the time, the so-called world peace and prosperity in the history books referred to the officials, scholars, and country gentry living a good life. As for the commoners at the bottom, at least before the establishment of China, they didn't have enough to eat and wear. Without a clear understanding of the commoners, it was impossible to understand the true pain of handing over 1,000,000 commoners. In Zhu Qiyu's eyes, all of this was just a number. It was still the same sentence. The foundation of the great Ming dynasty was still there. It was just 1,000,000 commoners at the bottom, so it was fine to pay. As long as the emperor and the officials could live well, what did this matter? Zhu Qiyu had never taken the people at the bottom seriously, and had never treated them as human beings. Only then did Zhu Qiyu casually ask this question. In that instant, the eyes of several people from the 6 ministries lit up. They knew that the time for them to speak had come. As if he was afraid that Zhu Qiyu would look down on him, the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, who wanted to make his presence known, was the first to stand up. "Your Majesty, this matter can be discussed. However, the topic needs to be changed. This isn't because we fear Bugnam of Gojoseon and want to give them 1,000,000 commoners. Rather, under the other party's request, we want to reward Bugnam of Gojoseon with the magnanimity of the Celestial Empire." The ancient people cared a lot about face. They opened their mouths and spoke of benevolence and righteousness. It wasn't a problem to ask them to hand over 1,000,000 commoners, but if they were forced to do so, then it didn't make sense. Who knew how the history books of later generations would scold them? Even if it was for the sake of their reputation, they had to cover it up. Zhu Qiyu naturally approved of this. He didn't want the people of later generations to scold him as a fatuous ruler. As a result, he nodded and said, "That's right. Beloved official Jin is right. Then I'll leave this matter to you to discuss. Once you have the results, just report it to me. When the time comes, the Ministry of Rights can send someone to communicate with the 5-star army." I think it would be better for Minister Hu to go personally. After all, Wunan Wang is your grandson-in-law. This subject is unwell. Please retire and return to your hometown. The Minister of Rights, Hu Ming, straightforwardly put down the board in his hand and knelt as he spoke. This was clearly a trap. To hand over 1,000,000 commoners for his own safety, this wasn't good to hear but also hard to say. With Hu Ming's shrewdness, it would be strange if he agreed to do such a thing that would go down in history for 10,000 years. Not to mention that Zhu Qiyu had deliberately pointed out his relationship with Yang Chendong. Hu Shao was even less likely to pick up on this topic. He didn't ask for people to say that he was himself and his grandson-in-law was his grandson-in-law. However, as long as he was the one who did it, it was inevitable that others would mention it and say that he was a traitor. Hu Ming knelt on the ground and asked for his resignation. This greatly exceeded Zhu Qiyu's expectations. The Minister of Rites, Wang Zhi, had already asked for his resignation and he had basically agreed. If he let Hu Ming leave now, those who didn't know would think that he wasn't tolerant. He was venting his anger on his subordinates because they had lost a battle. Zhu Qiyu was someone who cared about his reputation. His face immediately darkened and he wanted to curse. However, he knew that his deterrence towards Hu Ming was too little. He couldn't casually take him down and anger Yang Chendong, but he also couldn't remove him from his position and make Bugnam of Gojoseon think too much. After realizing his helplessness, Zhu Qiyu could only shake his head with an ugly expression. Since beloved official whose health isn't good, you should rest at home for a while. You are a pillar of the country and cannot be left out. After your body recovers, you still have to share my burdens. I'll leave this matter to the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites, Huang Cheng, to handle. Zhu Qiyu backed down. In the end, he still didn't have the guts to remove Hu Ming from his position. This was enough to prove that he was very afraid of Yang Chendong. This old subject thanks your majesty. After receiving benefits, Hu Ming expressed his thanks and stood up. Then, he turned and strode away. Although he was old, he didn't seem to be feeling unwell at all. After Hu Ming left, he didn't even have the intention to discuss the matter. It was clear that he wouldn't participate in this matter. This was to avoid suspicion. However, in reality, how could he not want to avoid the matter being discussed? That was millions of commoners. If he handed them over, it would cause a lot of discussion. He definitely wouldn't do something that would damage his reputation. Chapter 1352. As soon as Hu Shao left, Wang Zhi also strode after him. He had just asked to resign, and from the looks of it, Zhu Qiyu had already agreed. Right now, he only needed to go home and prepare his things. He would not step into this trap. The remaining 4 ministers looked at each other, but in the end, they did not say anything. Since they did not have the courage to resign, they had to face some things that they had to face. Zhu Qiyu left the 6 ministers behind. That night, the news reached the ears of the ministers. In accordance with Bugnam of Gojoseon's wishes, Bai Ming wanted to negotiate with him. At the same time, the news of Hu Shao recuperating at home and Wang Zhi resigning also spread. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites, Huang Cheng, was temporarily in charge of the Ministry of Rites. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Appointments, Yuan, was in charge of the evaluation and appointment of all the ministers. When the news came out, the houses of the 2 ministers were filled with people and carriages. Countless officials used all sorts of reasons to congratulate them or reminisce about the past. It gave people the feeling that there was no danger at the border. From this, it could be seen that Bai Ming's foundation had already been shaken. On the morning of the 2nd day, one minister and the other temporarily in charge of the Ministry of Rites, Huang Cheng, and Yuan, came to the palace to express their thanks. What they saw was indeed Zhu Qiyu's cold face. It was because the embroidered uniform guards had sent over information. According to them, Bai Ming's 400,000 soldiers were in danger. Even the 100,000 Liaodong cavalry led by Fang Dingshan had been injured by the 5-star army. They had either been killed or captured. This was like a bolt from the blue that smashed into Zhu Qiyu's head, completely destroying his dreams. At the same time, it was like a heavy stone had smashed into the heads of the ministers, making them recognize reality. The 5-star army is actually this powerful? After the Minister of War, Yi Ming, heard the news, he stood in place as if he had been petrified. A newly appointed minister, a minister in charge of carrying out the duties of a minister, had encountered such a thing on his first day. His expression was also extremely ugly. They did not even have time to flatter the emperor. Instead, they discussed the matter of negotiating with the 5-star army with the other 4 ministers. This time, there was also the imperial censor of the left, Chen Yi. The censor represented the imperial censor. This matter was of great importance. In order to reduce the number of accusations and scoldings, Chen Zhao had to participate. Of course, this didn't stop people from poking at their backs. After all, some people made a living doing this. They could hear about things and impeach anyone they didn't like. Sometimes, even the emperor was their target. They would often say that the emperor was immoral, that he needed to wake up 3 times, or that he had already committed a crime. Baiming didn't have much time left, so he had to quickly come up with a countermeasure. It could be seen that they had no choice but to agree to Yang Qindong's request in a hurry. However, the migration of millions of people was not a small matter, and preparations had to be made. As for the mastermind, Yang Qindong, he had indeed left Origin City long ago. After more than a month, he had arrived at Haiphong City in Yunnan Province. Haiphong City was a seaside city that belonged to the Vietnam province. With the continuous expansion of the 5-star Army's navy and the destruction of the nearby countries and forces, it had become an important port for the 5-star Army's navy. For example, the people of other races from the Vietnam province who had come to support other places would board the ships here and be sent to different places. Yang Qindong's ship also stopped here. The person in charge of receiving them was the commander of the 2nd Sea Division, Zhao Changwang. This time, they stopped at Haiphong City to replenish their food supplies. Unexpectedly, after the ship stopped, Yang Qindong disembarked with 500 black cavalry soldiers. He said that he wanted to investigate the situation of the people. Over the years, Yang Qindong's main focus was on expanding the territory. He only had a simple understanding of the destroyed countries and occupied territories from some memorials and local reports. Without investigation, there was no right to speak. It wasn't that Yang Qindong didn't trust his officials, but he was worried about the situation below. Sometimes, even the officials he appointed would be fooled by the people below. Wasn't there a saying among the people? The king of hell was easy to see, but the little devils were hard to deal with. Often, the performance of the lowest level officials was the most important thing to the lives of the people. He didn't say anything to anyone. Even Zhao Changwang left with the main ship under his orders. Only Shen Xing was left with the ship at the port, ready to set off at any time. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, changed into a set of green robes. He brought the Black Rider Dragon Guards, who were also wearing commoner clothes, ashore and headed towards the nearby fields. Haiphong City was under the jurisdiction of Chu Yi City, and Yang Qindong placed the first target of his investigation here. In a restaurant on Dongpan Street in the city, Yang Qindong found a seat by the window. The restaurant's location was not bad, and the view was good. More importantly, it was very lively, and there were all kinds of people. Often, it was this kind of person's personal attitude expressed by their words and actions that was the most authentic. He ordered a pot of wine, 1 meat and 1 vegetable. On his left was Beta Persei, and on his right was Chiu Vi. Yang Qindong sat there and listened to the discussions of the people at the next table with great interest. Because of Yang Bao, the people of the country were no longer ignorant people who only looked up at the sky and looked down at the ground. They had a better understanding of the outside world, and they had begun to learn how to discuss national affairs. This was just like the capital of the future. Anyone who was found could give some opinions on national policies and national affairs. It gave people the feeling that if they were to become officials, they would definitely do better than others. There were many such people in the restaurant. Through their mouths, they already knew that the 5-star army had won the battle in the first city, and that they had surrounded and captured 400,000 Baiming soldiers. Even the 5-star army had asked Baiming to provide 1 million Han Chinese people. A young man who was dressed very ordinarily, but had a good spirit and appearance, took a sip of warm wine at this time and began to talk loudly. Bugnam of Gojoseon is wise. After winning the battle, he doesn't want the land. He only wants the people. This seems to benefit the imperial court of Baiming, but in fact, without the population, how long can Baiming last? This is like boiling a frog in warm water. Before long, without the people, Baiming will not have any chance to fight back. When the time is ripe, isn't it easy to take them down? As soon as this person spoke, Yang Chendong, who was sitting there, was stunned. He really didn't expect that there would be such a genius among the people. He actually analyzed the matter so thoroughly. He couldn't help but look at him in a new light. Alright, this brother of yours just read the recent Yang report, and that's why he said this. Speaking of which, you didn't see this. It's just what the Yang report said. Another dark-skinned man with a stronger body retorted. His Chinese was not very standard, but it was enough to let people understand what he wanted to say. Just now, Yang Chendong was still shocked by this person's clear thinking. Now, after hearing this, he realized that this was not this person's idea, but a public report in the Yang report. Then, he smiled and sighed in his heart, good, this Yang report did a good job. He opened up the wisdom of the people. Don't think that the people who don't know the reason are the best and the most obedient. In fact, this is not beneficial to a country at all. Other than being useful to corrupt officials, it is useless to a country. If the people don't have a sense of ownership, how can they love a country? For thousands of years, how many people faced the change of dynasties and didn't have many thoughts at all? In their eyes, no matter who became the emperor, they were still ordinary people. As long as they could eat their fill and wear warm clothes, it was the same no matter who the emperor was. This was the drawback of not having the spirit of a master. Often, there were a lot of people like this. They had no beliefs, no goals, and no understanding of the outside world. Once someone stood out and urged them to rebel, they would be easily fooled without knowing the truth. With the wisdom of the people, things would be different. They would have their own judgment. Once something happened, they would be able to analyze it in their own way. In the face of such smart people, it would be even more difficult to make use of them. In the restaurant, everyone laughed. The man who spoke first didn't get angry because he was exposed. Instead, he said with conviction, it's true that what Yang Bao said just now was true. However, I agree with him and can use him. What can you do about it? There's nothing we can do about it. You are so wise and powerful. The others laughed loudly and said. The atmosphere in the restaurant was good. Obviously, many people were excited because they could participate in the discussion of the country's affairs. It seemed that this could prove that they were useful people. They were no longer muddle-headed people who didn't know what the outside world was and didn't know what to do tomorrow. Yang Chendong waited for half an hour. He saw groups of people leave and groups of people come. From their mouths, he heard many things about Itsu City and even Vietnam. There were all kinds of big and small things. For example, someone in the East City got married. Someone in the West City got a military merit because his son joined the 5-star army. Not long ago, the local Vietnamese auxiliary soldiers beat gongs and drums and sent a certificate of merit and rice noodles. Old Wang in the South City had a better harvest this year than anyone else. He was already named as an agricultural pioneer and so on. Naturally, there were also some minor officials who were sued because they overcharged a merchant or a commoner. They were arrested and sent to the yamen. There were also people who shouted that Governor Yuan was a wise man. From these trivial matters, Yang Chendong's expression had always been good. It was said that one could see the whole leopard from a single spot and see the overall situation from a corner. Just from the information obtained in the restaurant, it could be seen that the entire Itsu city was still very good. At least, Yang Chendong was satisfied. Although there were some small flaws, such as some minor officials who did not abide by the law, this was unavoidable. Chapter 1353. The human heart was like this. There were always some people whose desires began to expand after they gained power. Often, such people could not be seen before they got to the top. Sometimes, the human heart had to be tested to know. Let's go and take a look at the fields. It was now the end of September, the time of harvest. Yang Chendong wanted to personally take a look at the fields and understand the first-hand details. Yang Chendong got up and left. Beta Persei put down a few Han coins on the table and left with Chiu Vi. Not far away, hundreds of black cavalry in different clothes also got up and kept a certain distance from the center of the city to the south city. Yang Chendong just heard that old Wang in the south city planted well and had a great harvest. He wanted to see the results of this harvest. Compared to the prosperity and satisfaction of the people in the city, the outside of the south city was a busy scene. On the cultivated fields, there were countless small black dots busily digging. Countless sweet potatoes were dug out from the ground one by one and sent to the prepared bamboo baskets at the side. After asking around casually, he found old Wang's place. Yang Chendong walked closer and found that the sweet potatoes of this family were bigger and fuller than the other neighbors. This must be Brother Wang. This year's harvest is good. Yang Chendong walked closer with a smile on his face. Although he was wearing a green robe, his temperament could not be changed. Farmer Old Wang could feel it at first glance when he saw Yang Chendong. His expression became more respectful and said, "I don't dare to be called Brother Wang. Just call me Old Wang. But I wonder who this gentleman is. Oh, I'm just a passerby. I heard that the harvest here is good, so I came to take a look." How is it? This year's harvest is good. The days should be better than the previous years. Of course, Yang Chendong would not reveal his identity. He chuckled and squatted down. He came to the ground and put his hand into the soil. Not long after, a huge sweet potato was dug out by him. Yang Chendong's movements were still very standard. It was not an exaggeration to say that he looked like a professional. After all, he had done this kind of farm work in the early days of the Yang family village. He was the one who dug out the earliest potatoes, so he naturally had his own experience. When an expert made a move, one would know whether or not he was an expert. When Yang Chendong did this, Lao Wang laughed. "I didn't expect this mister to be an expert as well, hee." This smile instantly brought the relationship between the two of them closer. When they started to talk, they naturally became much more casual. Old Wang was a talkative person. It didn't take long for Yang Chendong to learn a lot of things from him. For example, the reason why his family's land had a better harvest and higher output was because he was more willing to use fertilizer. Compared to other people, his family also raised a lot of poultry, such as chickens, ducks, geese, porpoises, pigs, and so on. Using their feces on the ground could make the soil more fertile, so the yield would naturally be higher than other people's. Not only that, once the grain was harvested, in order to prevent the grain from being cheap and harming the farmers, he could also use the surplus grain to feed the poultry. Then, he could sell the meat to increase his income, allowing him to live a better life. Wasn't this the cycle of the food chain? Could it be called reasonable utilization? After Yang Chendong heard this, he asked with a surprised expression, "Lao Wang, how did you think of these things? You are really smart." I am a person who does not eat a single word. How could I have such a brain? This was all said by our provincial governor Xiao Yuan. These things were also recorded in the Yang report. It was just that other people were suspicious. The old man was honest and felt that it was feasible, so he did it. Thus, this year, the output of the land was much higher than others, and the meat was also sold at a high price. However, next year, the other farmers will follow suit. This way, the price of meat and grain will drop a little. However, this is already very good. To think that I, Lao Wang, have lived for close to 50 years. When have I ever lived like this? In the past, I had to thank the heavens for being able to eat my fill. Once there was a famine, I had to go out early to beg for food. Now that I think about it, those days were really not for humans. Lao Wang was still sighing and saying something, but Yang Chendong could no longer hear him. His thoughts had already landed on the sentence that he just said, the price of meat and grain will drop a little next year. There was a saying that said, prosperity. The common people suffered. Death. The common people suffered. This not only meant that the people who started the war were the common people, but it also meant that when there was a harvest, the people who suffered were still the common people. Because once there was a harvest, the grain would face the problem of having too much. As the saying goes, the rarer something is, the more valuable it is. Anything, once there was too much of it, it would no longer be valuable. Thus, sometimes, a harvest would instead become a small disaster. In this way, it would definitely affect the enthusiasm of the common people. If they did not work hard to farm in the coming year, what would they do when there was a famine? Without enough grain, it was inevitable that people would starve to death. This was something that Yang Chendong absolutely could not allow to happen. If he wanted to solve this problem, he had to think of a way. Yang Chendong thought of a phrase in his heart, protection price. Yes, protection price. It referred to the lowest standard price for each crop. If they sold at this price, the common people would not earn much, but they would definitely not lose out. In this way, no matter what kind of harvest it was, the common people would not have to worry about not being able to sell their grain. This way, their enthusiasm would become higher and higher, and the grain produced would naturally increase. As for how to deal with the grain that was bought at the protection price? If it were someone else, they might have a headache, but Yang Chendong did not need to worry. The current Yangtze's territory was so large that it was unimaginable. It was far beyond the ancients. With such a large territory, it was impossible to have a harvest everywhere. He could transfer grain from the south to the north or from the north to the south. In this way, no matter where there was a famine, he would not have to worry about it. He could use the grain to adjust. Besides, he could also sell the surplus grain to other forces and countries that did not belong to Yangtze. This was especially true for some small countries that did not have much history. They had never had enough grain to eat. As long as the price was reasonable, everything would not be a problem. Since he thought of the protection price, Yang Chendong felt that it was necessary to carry out this matter immediately. Now was the time for a harvest. He could not hurt the common people because of too much grain. Beta Persei, send someone to inform the Chu-E city's government office. Tell them that I'm here. Since the matter was almost understood, Yang Chendong did not need to hide his identity. He also wanted to see the officials here and give them some encouragement. After all, the development here was still very good. The news of Bugnam of Gojoseon's appearance in Chu-E city quickly spread. After the local officials heard it, they all opened their mouths wide in disbelief. Speaking of which, they were just the managers of a small town. At best, they were just a 7th-grade county magistrate. Now that they were going to meet the so-called emperor, who would not be nervous? Fortunately, Yuan Chuncheng, one of the 3 generals of Vietnam province, was training troops near Chu-E city. First of all, Chu-E city was a coastal town. There was an army stationed here. Once there was any danger, they could be the first-line soldiers to block and buy time for the main army to arrive. Second, the Vietnamese auxiliary soldiers could also help the nearby farmers to harvest crops. In coastal cities, hurricanes could appear at any time. With them there, some unpredictable losses could be reduced. Yuan Chuncheng had seen Yang Qindong before. However, at that time, Yang Qindong's status was far from as noble as it was now. When he heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had appeared in his territory, Yuan Chuncheng tidied up his clothes and said to the bodyguard beside him, "Immediately inform Governor Yuan of this news. Be quick." At this time, the security of Chu-Yi City's government office had been taken over by the Black Cavalry. They had changed back to their military uniforms and were wearing black armor and black helmets. Only their mouths, noses, and eyes were exposed. With just a glance, a murderous aura rushed over, causing many officials who had not been on the battlefield to be nervous and shocked. As Vietnam Province, which was only a province of Yangtze, the officials here were not all Han people. Among them, a small number of them were from foreign races. These non-human beings were all literate and knowledgeable. Their appearance greatly alleviated the lack of Han officials. It was also because of the existence of these people that the various government offices were able to operate quickly. Once there were any new policies, they would be able to be transmitted to the ears of the people in time. Of course, Yang Qindong had never truly believed in the foreign races. Thus, these people did not occupy any important positions. Not only that, they would also be like the Han officials, adopting the system of transferring officials. That was to say, they could only stay in one place for a maximum of 4 years. After 4 years, they would definitely change places. This could prevent them from joining forces to the greatest extent. Yang Qindong's sudden appearance caused the officials to be surprised and excited. They were excited and somewhat afraid. After all, Yang Qindong had led the 5-star army to expand the territory and killed countless people. Often, wherever the army passed by, countless statues would be erected. Thinking about the scene of those dead people's heads being placed together, only a few people could not help but tremble. After meeting the officials one by one, Yang Qindong smiled and praised them, causing each of the officials to feel as if they were bathed in a spring breeze. Yuan Chuncheng, who was at the side, also helped to introduce the names of the officials, their positions, what they were in charge of, their contributions, and so on. This also allowed Yang Qindong to have a more intuitive understanding. After meeting the officials, and at Yang Qindong's request, Yuan Chuncheng found the person in charge of Chu-Yi City's Yang newspaper, the so-called reporters, representatives of merchants, representatives of farmers, as well as representatives of the handmade industry and some small factories. Chapter 1354. For 3 whole days, Yang Qindong met with people from all walks of life. He got first-hand information, and through talking with these people, he had a deeper understanding of the situation in Yunnan province. On the night of the 3rd day, the travel-worn governor Yuan Shaochen finally arrived at Chu-Yi City and came in front of Yang Qindong. 4 years ago, Lin Qindong ordered the governors to be replaced. Yuan Shaochen was transferred from the governor of Laos to the governor of Yunnan province. Although he was called Governor Yuan, he was not young, 28 years old. When he first took office, he was only 19 years old. Now that 9 years had passed, the facts had proven that Yang Qindong was right to let his brother-in-law take the position despite the objections of the masses. Just from the results, Yunnan province had always been in the first place, far better than the surrounding provinces such as Laos. Just from this point, it was enough to prove that Yuan Shaochen's ability was reassuring. 6th Young Master. After seeing Yang Qindong, tears flowed down from Yuan Shaochen's eyes. It was true that he was the governor of Yunnan province, and it seemed that he had a high position and power, equivalent to the master of a force, but he had never had such an awareness in his heart. In his eyes, he was just an official under Yang Qindong. He came to Yunnan province only to start working, in order to better repay Yang Qindong's kindness to the Yuan family. Fortunately, his performance did not disappoint, and he did it to make Yang Qindong satisfied. Good, good. Yang Qindong also sighed and stood up, shaking hands with Yuan Shaochen. He was naturally very satisfied with his brother-in-law, and the other party's achievements also made him proud. But when he saw the real person, he couldn't help but sigh. The other party's chin had a thick layer of beard. The other party was almost 30 years old, and he was left in Yunnan province for 9 years. He didn't have time to reunite with his family, nor did he have time to mourn for his parents. Speaking of which, he felt sorry for the other party. The two of them held hands and walked down together. Yang Chendong opened his mouth and said, "You've done well. The current development of the Vietnamese province has greatly exceeded my expectations. You've also completed your task well. How about it? Have you thought about changing places?" According to the requirements of the transfer system, the officials would change places every 4 years. It was just that considering that the change of a province's governor would cause a lot of trouble, this system was not implemented so seriously. But in order to prevent the situation from happening, Yang Chendong still decided to change the governor who had been in office for more than 4 years. Just to form a kind of routine, this time he asked for Wuan Xiaoqian's opinion. When he heard that he wanted to change places, Wuan Xiaoqian's eyes lit up first, and then he shook his head. "Sixth young master, although I have done a lot of things here, it is not perfect. There are still some things that have not been completely solved. I want to work for a few more years to solve these problems. There are endless things to be done." Yang Chendong shook his head and said, "You have solved the problem in Yunnan province very well. The next thing will be handed over to others to do. You have to give others a chance to practice. As for you, you should go to a higher position to learn, so that you can take on more important responsibilities in the future." This meant that he was going to put an important position in an important position. Wuan Xiaoqian was naturally grateful. "Okay, I will listen to the sixth young master. That's it. In this way, you will be ready to hand over the work in the near future, and there will naturally be someone to replace your position. This time, I asked you to come over mainly to listen to your report on the situation in Yunnan province, and also to discuss with you the issue of the protection price of food. Of course, you can put forward your own opinions on the issue of agricultural tax and commercial tax." It was already very late at night, but the candles in the study room did not go out. They burned until dawn of the next day. After the two of them had breakfast together, under Yang Chendong's satisfied gaze, Wuan Xiaoqian led a group of Yunnan province officials to send him to Haiphong City. Wuan Xiaoqian watched as Yang Chendong boarded the warship and went straight to Qiqian City. Qiqian City. It was no longer a small seaside city. After more than 10 years of continuous construction, it looked like a modern city. Compared to the straight cement road, there was a street lamp every 50 meters. Within a mile, one could definitely see a small park. There were rows of green trees on both sides of the road. Walking here, breathing in the sufficient oxygen emitted by the green plants gave people a feeling of relaxation and relaxation. In the city, there were orderly small districts one after another, and tall buildings made of cement and steel were connected to each other. They used the smallest area to meet the residential needs of more people. Every district had a large square. At night, there were people dancing, playing, and selling all kinds of snacks and goods. Compared to the dark outside, this place was like heaven. The only imperfection was the hundreds of tall chimneys in Qiqian City. They would occasionally emit black smoke during the day, affecting the spatial state of the entire city. Fortunately, the city lord's mansion had already paid attention to this problem, and had already considered moving the factories under the chimneys out, and building new factories in the suburbs. With the appearance of the rubber trees, there were many carriages and rickshaws on the straight cement road in the city. From time to time, one could also see some streets being paved with tracks. According to the well-informed people, track chain cars had been successfully researched, and would soon appear in the entire city and be used on a large scale. At that time, it would greatly increase the speed of people's travel. Everything developed in an orderly manner. Several warships arrived at the new dock at dawn. Then, rows of cold vanguard soldiers completely sealed off the dock. A group of generals with gold beans on their shoulder plates lined up in an orderly manner and looked respectfully at the warships approaching the dock. Under the gazes of the deputy commander of the army, Ling Feng, the deputy commander of the navy, Gao Xiong, and a group of high-ranking officers, Yang Chendong, who was still dressed in a green robe, walked out of the cabin under the protection of a group of black cavalry. He saw the group of high-ranking military officers who had come to welcome him. This time, when Yang Chendong returned, he only informed the upper echelons of the army. Whether it was City Lord Yu Qian or the ladies in the palace, he did not send any news. He did not want to affect these people because of his arrival. As for the people in the army, he had to inform them even if he didn't want to. After all, the warships in charge of transporting him were the Navy's warships. Presumably, all the news had already been registered in the Navy's headquarters. Sixth Young Master. Ling Feng and Gao Xiong took the lead and walked forward, giving a standard military salute. Yang Chendong first returned a military salute, then smiled and reached out to pat the two on the shoulder. Thank you for your hard work. Sixth Young Master, you've worked hard. Perhaps it was because they hadn't seen each other for a long time, but both Ling Feng and Gao Xiong had a trace of restraint on their faces. As Yang Xie's territory grew bigger and bigger, Yang Chendong's status also rose. It wasn't the time when he couldn't play without a certain someone. Yang Chendong still had a lot of feelings for these veterans who had followed him since the beginning. He looked at the two with a gentle gaze and said, "This time, I'll be staying for a few months. I'll go to your headquarters to take a look. You just have to be prepared. For now, you guys can go back first. I'll go take a look at the city lord's mansion, then return to the palace." In the early morning of the city lord's mansion, from afar, one could see a few electric lights lit up. Needless to say, those must be the workers who had worked all night without rest. Compared to the army, which was divided into the navy and army, the local government was completely controlled by the city lord's mansion. Every policy issued from here could affect millions or even tens of millions of people. Therefore, every order had to be carefully considered and considered carefully before it was issued. Yu Qian worked overtime again. He only slept for a while when the sun was about to rise. Just now, the guards brought hot water over. After washing up, he sat down in the spacious and bright office and began to work. Piles of documents that needed to be approved were piled up beside his desk. Yang Xie's territory and power grew bigger and bigger. Every day, Yu Qian had to deal with more and more official documents. Knowing that his responsibilities were heavy, Yu Qian never dared to slack off. Even during the new year, he only rested for a day. As for the usual holidays, there was no such thing. This was not a hard and fast rule, but Yu Qian took the initiative to request to work overtime. He seemed to always have so much energy, like an old bull that did not know what fatigue was, working hard. This is the document sent by the Wei province. It contains the amount of food that has increased in their provincial warehouse this year. Take out the document from last month and compare it. Yu Qian did not even raise his head as he instructed. However, he did not know that the person standing in front of him was not his secretary or guards, but the leader of Yang Xie, the most important person, Yang Chendong. After speaking, Yu Qian still buried his head in the document in his hand. From time to time, he would lower his head and write something. After a while, when he felt that the shadow in front of him did not leave, he still did not raise his head and said, "Why don't you go? Can't you find it? Didn't I say? The documents of each province have to be filed separately. Go and look for it properly." After saying all this, Yu Qian still buried his head in his work. However, he quickly noticed something and his face showed displeasure. Although he rarely lost his temper at the staff around him, when it came to work, he still dared to scold them. Yu Qian raised his head with a displeased expression and wanted to criticize her. When he raised his head, Yang Chendong's appearance entered his eyes. Although they hadn't seen each other for 2 years, this didn't prevent Yu Qian from recognizing Yang Chendong in the first place. Chapter 1355. The person standing in front of him was actually Yang Chendong. Yu Qian didn't seem to be able to react as he was stunned for a moment. Then, he remembered that the battle report said that Yang Chendong would be returning to Tsuxian City for the new year. He immediately got up and said, "Greetings to Bugnam of Gojoseon. Mr. Yu, you don't have to be like this. Quickly get up." Yang Chendong quickly reached out and helped Yu Qian up. Then, he looked touched. Wars were fought for money and stability at the rear. The reason why the 5-star army was able to win so many battles was because of Yu Qian, who stabilized the situation at the back. If it had to be said, it would be like the lyrics of the song, "Half of the military metal is mine, half of it is yours." The muscles on Yu Qian's face kept trembling as he was supported by Yang Chendong. His grip on Yang Chendong's hands tightened. "Wunan King, you guys fought well." Yu Qian grew up in Great Ming and was used to seeing the people of Great Ming being bullied by other races, especially by the Walla and Tatars. The Great Ming dynasty could only defend and couldn't fight back at all. Yu Qian had once felt sad about this. The so-called Celestial Empire, the so-called 10,000 nations, those were just superficial appearances. It was hard to say when the flames of war would start again. The only thing the Great Ming dynasty could do was to defend the cities. As for the common people outside the cities, they would be bullied, robbed, and even killed. Their money would be stolen, and their houses would be burned down. These were all normal occurrences. Even if the news spread to the imperial court, the officials wouldn't just side with the emperor. Other than opening the granary and releasing grain, what else could they do? What could they do? What did they dare to do? Yu Qian was once an official in the imperial court. He was angry about this and fought for it. However, when he saw the treasury's silver and grain recorded in the Ministry of Revenue, there was only silence. The country was too poor and couldn't afford to fight any big or fierce battles. Not to mention the Mongolian cavalry in the vast grasslands. Even if you could defeat them, what would you gain? Those nomads were so poor that they didn't even have an iron pot. What was the point of winning? When the cost and the benefits could not be proportional, sending troops to the grassland would become a slogan and a great challenge for the future generations. Like the stars and the moon in the sky, they could only look at them but could not reach them. Yu Qian even thought that if this continued, sooner or later, the Great Ming dynasty would be destroyed in the hands of these grassland wolves. Just like how Yuan defeated Song, who could defeat Ming? Every time he thought of this matter and looked at the lives of the other courtiers, they did not have to worry about food or clothing. All they did every day was fight for power and profit. This made him deeply disappointed. He could not see any hope, nor did he know if this problem could be solved by his descendants. Now, Yang Chendong's sudden appearance had solved the problem that he thought was impossible to solve. The 5-star army not only defeated the grassland wolves that the Great Ming dynasty's people feared, but they also occupied the grassland, built a city, opened up wastelands, and developed businesses. This allowed countless Han people to live a worry-free life. Even the status of the Han people had been raised. Looking at it now, which of the people under Yang Xie's influence did not feel proud to be a Han person? Yang Chendong had done all these things that they did not dare to think about. As someone with a strong sense of national pride, how could Yu Qian not be grateful? No one was more touched than him about the improvement in the lives of the Han people. After all, he was in contact with this kind of work every day and received detailed data from the various provinces. In Yu Qian's eyes, Yang Chendong was like the savior of the Han people. Now that he saw Yang Chendong, he only wanted to kneel down and kowtow to him on behalf of the tens of thousands of Han people to thank him for his kindness. Yang Chendong noticed Yu Qian's excitement and was affected by it. He couldn't help but say, "Mr. Yu, this is the result of our joint efforts. We fought well because of your logistical support at the rear. No, no, how can our achievements be compared to those warriors who went to the battlefield to kill the enemy? Yu Qian said modestly, but these were also his heartfelt words. Yu Qian did not sit on the office chair, and Yang Chendong naturally did not sit there either. The two of them found a sofa and sat down. Then, they talked about Yang Xie's situation. This conversation lasted for more than 2 hours until Beta Persei could not help but remind them, "Young master, it's time to eat." "Oh, look, I'm hungry." "Huh, come, bring the food here." Yang Chendong chuckled. Yang Chendong and Yu Qian talked about a lot of things for the entire morning and afternoon. They talked about the protection price of food, the specific division of business tax, and the appointment of some provincial and county officials, as well as the economic growth data. The two of them talked about whatever came to mind. In the end, Yang Chendong said, "Mr. Yu, the people are the foundation of the people. As long as the people are stable, the country will be stable. So, this prince does not want to increase taxes. What do you think? Never increase taxes. What a good benevolent government. Who mentioned the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors? Who said that during the spring and autumn period? This was a true benevolent ruler. The first person in history to do such a thing was Kong Pockmarked, who built slaves. He created a prosperous era of Kong and Qian. It had to be said that Kong Pockmarked was very good at bluffing people. Later on, Master Jin and countless Manchurian remnants thought that this was a concrete manifestation of Kong Pockmarked's benevolent government. And now, Yang Chendong appeared here. Naturally, this person had nothing to do with it. He became the first person to propose never increasing taxes. Although he was not an emperor, he was better than an emperor, or even better than an emperor. Since he said never to increase taxes, then he would definitely never increase taxes. Hearing this, Yu Qian's body trembled. His heart was filled with joy. After about a few breaths, he actually knelt in front of Yang Chendong. He bowed and said, "I, on behalf of the millions of people, thank Bugnam of Gojoseon for his benevolent government." Benevolent government. Good, Mr. Yu, quickly get up, quickly get up. Seeing Yu Qian so excited, Yang Chendong quickly reached out and helped him up. Then he sighed. Even a great talent like Yu Qian was so excited when he heard that the taxes would never be increased. One could imagine what the people would be like when they knew. And the so-called never increased taxes meant that taxes would never increase. The specific meaning was that the tax amount of ding yin would be fixed, and there would be no increase in taxes. The governors of the provinces would always use the ding yin as a fixed amount, and there would be no increase or decrease. The new ding yin would not be counted as ding yin, and households with more than 1 ding yin would only have to pay 1 ding yin. Of course, taxes were different. Originally, Yang Xie did not place much importance on taxes. Even when they needed to use the people, they would still give them money. It was just that it was not much. But after all, this was Yang Chendong's matter. In other words, if one day he was no longer here, would taxes rise again? And now, after Yang Chendong shouted out the slogan of never increasing taxes, the people under Yang Xie could be at peace. Because this meant that in the future, Yang Chendong's descendants would also have to respect this decision. This sentence would also become a rule that would be enforced forever. In other words, this could become an ancestral rule of Yang Xie. In Yang Xie, Yang Chendong was equivalent to an ancestor. This was the difference between him and the ruler of a city. This was also one of the important reasons why in Yang Xie's territory, any policy could be implemented smoothly. For example, whether it was the southern Ming or Baiming, if they wanted to make a new policy, they would have to bring benefits to the nobles and the country gentry. Once the new policy harmed the interests of the other party, it would inevitably be met with great resistance. This was also the reason why, apart from Shang Yang's reform, the other reforms had all failed. Their actions harmed the interests of some people, so naturally, there would be many people who opposed it. It could be said that it was extremely difficult to implement it. This was also why the Great Ming had no lack of insightful people, but many good policies could not be implemented. However, in Yang Chendong's case, this was not a problem. He was the ancestor of Yang Xie. Whether it was the local government or the military, he was the core. In addition, under the efforts of Yang Xie's propaganda department, he had long become a legend. Every word of such a person was like the truth. Who would dare to stop him? Who would be able to stop him? It was just like never increasing taxes. Perhaps if it was someone else who did it, they would have to face all kinds of problems. However, this did not happen to Yang Chendong. Yu Qian had seen the key point, which was why he was so excited. Yang Chendong was also very happy. He was happy to receive Yu Qian's praise. With his support, this work was much easier to do. Alright, Mr. Yu, this matter is settled. Later, draft the work in this king's name. Also, please consider the price of food. The standard cannot be too high, nor too low. In short, the interests of the people must be the priority. Yang Chendong knew that it was time to leave. Presumably, the news of his return to Crimson City had already spread. His wives in the palace must be very anxious, especially his 2 children. He missed them very much. After not seeing them for 2 years, he did not know how tall they had grown. In the end, Yang Chendong still left the city lord's mansion. Then, the group of people went straight to the palace. This time, they did not ride a horse. Instead, they sat in a carriage. Considering the problem of hygiene in the city, unless the situation was urgent, no one was allowed to casually ride a horse on the streets. In the carriage with rubber tires and shock absorbers, Yang Chendong sat on the comfortable sofa, feeling very comfortable. Looking out the window made of glass and watching the beautiful scenery flash before his eyes, he felt a little excited. Chapter 1356. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was homesick. His wife and children were in the palace. In some ways, this was his home. At the entrance of the palace, there was a line of children wearing special military uniforms standing in a row. They held wooden swords in their hands and were dressed in military uniforms. From afar, they looked like they were standing in a neat row. Princess Xianxia, who was already 5 years old, was standing at the front of the line. She wore a female military uniform with her head held high and her chest puffed out. Wearing a small beret, she looked like a female general and was very eye-catching. Beside Yang Jie stood Yang Bo, who was less than 3 years old. As Yang Chendong's eldest son, he was likely to inherit the throne in the future. At this time, he was also wearing a special military uniform. Because of the rich nutrition, he gave off a strong and dignified feeling. The only difference between him and his sister was that he seemed to be unable to stand still. His eyes would occasionally look at the road in the distance, as if he was waiting for something. The heir and princess came out together. The only person who could make them wait was naturally their father, Yang Chendong. Yang Bo didn't have much of an impression of Yang Chendong. After all, his father left him when he was very young. Most of his impressions of Yang Chendong came from the mouths of others. From the mouths of others, his father seemed to be omnipotent and capable of anything. Children all worship heroes. Yang Bowie was extremely proud to have such a father. Every time he heard others talk about his father, he would involuntarily puff out his chest. It was as if he was saying to others, "Come, praise my father. I am his eldest son." Under his pride, Yang Bo had more than once thought about what he would look like when he saw his father and how he would perform. But when he really saw Yang Chendong, he became a little afraid. He didn't know if his father would like him. If he didn't, then what would he do? Don't look around. Father will come back at any time. You have to perform well. Yang Jia whispered when she noticed her brother's absent-minded look. Okay. Yang Bo nodded in agreement. But this was only because his sister was usually too dignified. In fact, his worries did not disappear. Instead, he took the opportunity to ask softly, "Sister, do you think Imperial Father will like me?" "Yes, we are all Father's good children. Anyway, Father used to like me very much. I think he will like you too." Of course, little Yang Jia didn't dare to be too sure, so she had to use herself as an example. "Oh." Little Yang Bo nodded his head again and replied in a half-understanding manner. The group of children was still waiting quietly. Those who could enter this team were not children of ordinary families. For example, there were Tiger's Mane's son and daughter, Beta Persei's son, Yang San's son and daughter, and so on. There were also people like Yu Mian's son, who was also Yu Qian's grandson. Their loyalty was unquestionable, and they would grow up together. It could be imagined that these people would most likely become Yang Bo's people in the future, and they would also be the most trustworthy group of people. They were still waiting. After lunch, the team began to gather here. In the words of little Yang Jia, who was the leader of the children, they wanted to welcome Imperial Father in their best state. They wanted him to see that although they were very young, they could also protect their home like adults and become great talents. Little Yang Jia even publicly said more than once that she wanted to be a female general in the future, lead troops to war, and expand Yang Xia's territory. Under the guidance of little Yang Jia, these little friends also had the same idea. They were also fantasizing about one day riding a warhorse and killing in all directions, becoming heroes. The waiting time always felt very long. Fortunately, Yang Chendong's carriage finally appeared. From afar, when a group of carriages came towards the palace and the guards near the palace stood upright and saluted, the children knew that it must be Bugnam of Gojoseon. Sitting in the carriage, Yang Chendong saw the scene of children standing in a row in front of the palace through the transparent glass from afar. At this moment, Yang Wu, who was in charge of welcoming Yang Chendong, sat beside him. "Young master, it's the princess and the prince. They are standing in line to welcome the arrival of the young master." Upon hearing that his daughter and son were in the group, Yang Chendong let go of all his reservations and said loudly, "Isn't this nonsense? It's still very hot at noon today. Who told them to stand here and wait for me? Hurry, speed up, let's hurry over." After the coachman received the order, he immediately cracked the whip and moved forward. Amidst the cracking of the whip, the speed of the carriage increased by a lot. In just a moment, they arrived at the gate of the palace. Then, the carriage stopped and a somewhat anxious figure walked out. Who else could it be but Yang Chendong? With a golden cloak on his body, Yang Chendong became the center of everyone's attention the moment he appeared. As soon as he got down from the carriage, he walked straight to the girl in front of the line, little Yang Jia. Yang Chendong gently picked up little Yang Jia and spun her around in his arms. Immediately, giggles could be heard. Little Yang Jia said without any feeling of unfamiliarity, "Father, spin faster, faster." This was one of the games that Yang Jia was most willing to play when she was very young. She was also naturally bold and did not have the slightest fear of heights. Not only was she not afraid, but she was also very happy to play. Yang Chendong had been constantly training these past few years, and his strength had already reached the master realm. He did not know why he was tired, but he spun faster and faster. The two of them, one adult and one child, laughed continuously, attracting the attention of more people. At the same time, many people's faces revealed knowing smiles. After an unknown amount of time, a seemingly anxious voice sounded, "Father, the child also wants." Needless to say, the person who said this must be little Yang Bo. Only then did Yang Chendong lower his head to pay attention to his son, whose head only reached his knees. Regarding this son, Yang Chendong's impression of him was that he was still an infant drinking milk. However, he did not expect that after 2 years, he had grown so much. At that moment, his body only paused for a moment, then he reached out with his left hand to grab Yang Bo's body, and continued to spin with one hand each. With Yang Bo's little weight, it was naturally not in Yang Chendong's eyes. To him, there was no difference whether he spun one or two. On the other hand, Yang Bo was suddenly grabbed and spun in the air. He was really uncomfortable, and the tender flesh on his face even piled up because of this, as if he was about to cry at any time. A real man should not be afraid of anything. Even if you bleed, you should not cry. Bo, you are the first real man of our Yang family's next generation. Even more so, you should not cry casually, understand? Yang Chendong noticed the change in Yang Bo's expression and opened his mouth to speak. This was the first time Yang Chendong had spoken in Yang Bo's memory. It could also be called the first time he had taught him. Yang Bo heard it particularly clearly. Although with his little brain, he did not quite understand the meaning of a real man, but when he saw his father's serious expression, he instinctively nodded. This child understands. I am a real man, I will not cry. Good son. Yang Bo's performance made Yang Chendong very happy. At the same time, he praised him and spun even faster. After a while, the laughter of the father and son trio could be heard. Yang Chendong naturally knew the principle of going too far is as bad as falling short. After seeing the hot sweat on the heads of the daughter and son, Yang Chendong gently put them down, and with one hand in each hand, he strode into the palace. The main gate of the palace was already open. Usually, this gate would not be opened easily. Only when Huyen, as the first consort, went out would the gate be opened. Of course, Yang Chendong also had to follow this etiquette and treatment when he went in and out, but because he was often not at home, the gate was rarely opened for him. Now that Yang Chendong had returned, the real master had returned, the gate naturally had to be opened. In the palace square not far behind the gate, Huyen and the other 8 women were already waiting there with a group of maids. Yang Chendong now had 8 wives. Except for Huyen, who was the first consort, the others were all side consorts. Usually when Yang Chendong was not around, Huyen was in charge. Although the number of people was not small, they got along well. This was not only because Huyen had the ability to command, but also because these women could clearly see their own positions. Second, Madame Xiao Yin was born as a maid. Although she had followed Yang Chendong for the longest time, she had a sense of propriety when doing things, and she was very clear about who gave her everything. In her eyes, not only was Yang Chendong her master, Huyen was also her master, so she was naturally very obedient. Third, Madame Xiao Yuxue, and fourth, Madame Dong Xiangxiang. Both of them were of noble birth. If it were not for Yang Chendong's appearance, they would probably still be a concubine. Their living environment since young had long taught them who they could provoke and what they could not do. Facing the first consort, Huyen, who was a descendant of a famous family, they naturally respected her and did not dare to have any second thoughts. In the eyes of the two, it was already very fortunate that they were not disliked by Huyen. Fifth, Madame Tuoya, although her background was not bad, the various clans were now led by the Han. Just based on this point, she had fallen far behind. After coming to the palace, there were many things that she had to learn. It was already very fortunate that Huyen did not pick on her, so how would she dare to pick on her? Sixth, Madame Luan Xiaoyu. She had suffered since young, and Yang Chendong's arrival changed her and her family's lives. In her eyes, Yang Chendong was her benefactor, and so was Huyen. Naturally, there was nothing that she would not listen to and obey. Seventh, Madame Su Man. Although she was also a descendant of an official, she had declined after all, and when she first came, she had the idea of assassinating Yang Chendong. It could be said that she was someone who had made a big mistake. It was already a blessing that she was not punished for it, so how would she dare to act recklessly? Chapter 1357. 8th Madame Junko was just a princess of a destroyed country. Moreover, she had lived in Yang village for many years and had lived under the influence of Yuan for many years. She had long known what could be done and what could not be done. Naturally, she was very obedient. The madams were all sensible people, and Yuan was also a reasonable woman. She never used her status to pressure others. In such a big environment, everyone was naturally good. Not to mention that Yang Chendong had also expressed that his wife did not need to be beautiful, virtuous, or noble. There was only one requirement, and that was that they must be sensible. Otherwise, they would not be fated to be together. If they were not fated to be together, it meant a lot of things. No one dared to make wild guesses. Once they were forced to leave the palace because of immorality, their life would be completely ruined. Although Yang Chendong gave people the feeling that he was very nostalgic, there were some things that could not be challenged lightly. No one could bear the consequences. Under various reasons and circumstances, the atmosphere in the palace was very harmonious. At least, Yang Chendong's important matters had never been delayed because of the harem. He was very satisfied with this point. Holding the small hands of his daughter and son, Yang Chendong immediately quickened his pace when he saw the 8 madams standing in the square waiting for him. He walked toward Yuan in the middle of the crowd. Yang Chendong returned to Qixin city. This news did not take long for the whole city to know. Then his figure continued to appear in various places. The munitions factory was the cornerstone of the development of the Yang faction. Accompanied by the chief engineer, Feng Ku, who was also his disciple, Yang Chendong inspected many places for 3 days in a row. He also provided a lot of valuable experience. If one wanted to create a firearm, the raw material had to be qualified first. The iron of ancient times did not meet the requirements. The finished firearms that were created would mostly explode. How to make steel, how to press satin, how to build lathes, the level of technical skills and so on had to complement each other. Fortunately, after years of hard work, there was already a set of effective standards. Yang Chendong didn't know much about these things, but there were many books in the warehouse. When they were taken out and placed in the hands of smart people, they would be able to make use of their advantages. Thus, according to the books, they would be able to create more suitable firearms. The Type 95, rocket launchers, grenades, bullets, and artillery shells had already been formed. Now, the materials were being turned into finished products. There would be more machine tools, and more firearms that Yang Chendong knew would be manufactured. Although it would be a long process, Yang Chendong knew that more haste, less speed. He did not ask Feng Ku to speed up the research. What he needed was a safe and stable development. Remember, every weapon you make has to be up to standard. When the soldiers are fighting at the front lines, they are fighting with their lives on the line. If the weapon is not up to standard, then there will be huge problems. Yang Chendong was in the large conference room of the munitions factory. He had a serious face as he spoke to Feng Ku and the other higher-ups of the munitions factory. The people below were all holding pens and recording with their heads lowered. Occasionally, when they looked up and saw Yang Chendong talking, they all had expressions of admiration and conviction on their faces. In the entire Yangxia, Yang Chendong was the undisputed leader. In the eyes of many people, he was an omnipotent existence. It was also because of his appearance that everyone was able to live a good life that they didn't even dare to imagine before. Because of this, no one in the Yangxia disobeyed his words, and no one didn't believe him. For firearms and weapons that can be produced and used normally, we can add more lathes to ensure quality and quantity. As for how much money you need in this regard, you can apply to Mr. Yu. In this regard, the city lord's mansion will also vigorously support. As he spoke, Yang Chendong nodded lightly to Yu Qian, who was sitting at the side. Yu Qian had been forcibly dragged to the munitions factory by Yang Chendong to participate in this meeting. Ever since he saw that Yu Qian had lost a lot of weight, Yang Chendong decisively gave the order that in the future, Yuqian's job would be to take care of himself and listen as a supplement. What kind of person was Yuqian, and how upright he was, the history books had already given the answer. This person was also a person who could see the big picture. This was very rare. It must be said that Xianxia didn't lack talents. After all, there were so many places for people to display their talents. As long as people were willing to work hard, there was a ready-made platform, and there was no need to be afraid of no results. But among these people, there were still too few who could see the big picture. Perhaps they were loyal enough, but their brains weren't flexible enough. Or perhaps they were clever enough, but they had too many tricks up their sleeves. These kinds of people weren't very useful. Who knew when they would cause a big mess? There were also some people who were steady enough, but they were too inflexible. This wasn't suitable for the rapidly developing young faction. In comparison, there were too few leaders like Yuqian, who had a strength of character, was very calm, and could change according to the situation. Before a suitable replacement was found, Yuqian's body naturally needed extra attention. Yang Chendong gave the order that in the future, he didn't need to worry about small things. He only needed to take care of the big things. So he brought Yuqian with him wherever he went. While letting him relax, he also tried to change his way of working and his body's condition. In fact, Yang Chendong had already changed Yuqian's life. If he hadn't appeared, Yuqian would have been dead for more than 2 years. Yuqian carefully listened to Yang Chendong's instructions to the munitions factory, nodding from time to time. In the past, it wasn't that he didn't pay attention to the munitions factory. It was just that he didn't understand the rules here. Usually, he only saw some words written on paper, and then some instructions on how to transfer money. Now that he was following Yang Chendong, he had a more intuitive understanding of the situation here. Of course, he knew the importance of the munitions factory. He immediately nodded. "King, don't worry." Unknowingly, Yuqian also finally changed the way he addressed Yang Chendong. Just the word "king" was enough to prove that he recognized the other party in his heart. Speaking of which, people like Yuqian had a very strong sense of loyalty to the king. Although the ancients often said that water could carry a boat, it could also sink a boat. They also often said that the people were the foundation of the country. But how many people could really do that? Even the previous Yuqian couldn't do it. When there was a conflict between the king and the people, he would still consider things from the king's side. But now, after seeing Yang Chendong's actions, seeing the Han people living under the Yangxia's rule, and seeing how the Han people's lives were much better than before, and how the Han people were beginning to show their value, bringing all kinds of benefits to the Yangxia, he finally understood. The people. Just how powerful was the people? He finally understood what it meant to be a true citizen. He also finally understood that the people he served before were only the scholar officials and country gentry. He also finally understood that he had taken many detours before. Only the people at the bottom could represent the will of the people. As long as they lived well, the entire Yang faction would have unimaginable power. In other words, when Yang Chendong worked for the people, he was also working for himself. While creating good living conditions for the people, he was also paving the way for himself to achieve his goals and desires. When he really put the people first, his position became more and more stable, and the Yangxia's development also became more and more powerful. If one looked carefully at the development of the Yangxia, how could it not be a process of reform? Since ancient times, there were actually many so-called reforms. The famous ones were Wang Engshi's reform and the Wuxia reform, and the less famous ones were unknown. The only one that was successful was Shang Yang's reform. Why was that? It was because the reform was like cutting meat from the big clans, and it was like snatching food from the hands of the people who benefited from it. They had to face the obstruction of these powerful people. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was to succeed. Even with the support of the king, it was difficult to succeed. But looking at the development of the Yangxia, there was no such difficulty. First of all, the development of the Xianxia did not need the support of the big clans. Not only that, every time they occupied a piece of land, whether it was the local rich clans or the country gentry, they would become the first targets to be dealt with. Half of their family property would be confiscated, and then the whole clan would be divided into countless branches and moved to a foreign place. This made it impossible for them to work together to do anything that displeased the Xianxia. Second of all, with the help of Yang Chendong's various advanced ideas, Xianxia did not lack money. All he needed was people. He did not need the support of the big clans. As long as the people approved of him, he would be able to develop better. Third of all, from the beginning of the development of the Xianxia, he paid attention to fairness and justice. He paid attention to treating everyone equally. Because the guiding ideology played an important role, it changed the understanding of the people. This also greatly weakened the influence of the big clans. Fourth of all, Yang Chendong was a pioneer. He had the ability to keep his word. It could be said that as long as he did not make any mistakes, the development of the Xianxia would not have any problems. At the same time, he did not need to rely on anyone's strength. The big clans could not display their strength even if they wanted to. In short, the big clans did not have the opportunity to perform. They did not have the power, so all the changes could be carried out as they wished. No one could stop them. After leaving the ordnance factory, Yang Chendong, Yu Qian, and the others went to the secret tank base under the accompaniment of Feng Ku. They took out a total of 5 tanks from the warehouse and parked them there. One of them had been dismantled into countless pieces and became various small parts. The creation of a tank was a gradual process. It was not something that could be created just by saying that it could be created. Key components such as the engine were even more of a headache. Even Feng Ku, who was regarded as a once-in-a-century genius and had great talent, was helpless. Therefore, he used the stupidest method, which was to imitate. Chapter 1358. Following suit, he dismantled each component and memorized their locations. Then, they copied them one by one and finally pieced them together to create a new tank. In fact, after 2 years of hard work, most of the parts have been created. The polished parts were no different from the original parts. There were no problems with the style or specifications. However, when it came to some core technologies, they were unable to do it. Looking at the various parts on the ground and the number of engineers standing in the room, Yang Chendong knew that these people were working very hard. But even so, Yang Chendong wasn't optimistic about them. The difficulty of building a tank wasn't limited to the engine, but more importantly, the tank cannons that allowed the tank to unleash its power. Tank cannons were mainly cannons. High chamber pressure, long barrel, fast initial velocity, high abrasion, high precision requirements, and high metal smelting, processing technology, and design standards of a country were all very high. Also, it was important to note that cannons required cannons and cannons. The manufacturing of various cannons and cannons also required a lot of knowledge. However, these were not things that the current Yang weapon crafting stone could overcome. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a saying in the future. The number of countries that mastered tank cannon technology was less than the number of countries that mastered atomic bomb technology. From this point of view, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that tank cannons were harder to build than atomic bombs. But it didn't mean that it was hard. The research process couldn't be stopped. Otherwise, there would never be a day of success. Yang Chendong didn't mean to dispel everyone's enthusiasm. He just said to Feng Ku, the difficulty of building a tank is very high. There are also many problems that need to be solved. Don't think about becoming a fatty in one bite. It's better to do it step by step. Listening to Yang Chendong's guidance, Feng Ku also said with a serious face, "Yes, teacher, you're right. We're doing the same. Now we're researching a small engine. If we succeed, we can build a vehicle. When the word vehicle was mentioned, Feng Ke's face was also full of excitement. When he first heard this word, he was so shocked. Even now, thinking about it still made his blood boil. Yes, you're right. But building an engine isn't something that can be done overnight. Before that, we can build something else, such as a steam engine. Yang Qindong didn't plan to spoil things by rushing them. He still decided to follow the path of history. Steam engine? A thoughtful look flashed across Feng Ke's face. Previously, he had received a book about the steam engine from Yang Qindong and had studied it for a while. However, ever since he saw the engine, he put it aside. In his opinion, since there was already something more advanced, of course, he should use it. That's right, the steam engine. That thing doesn't require much core technology, and with the current strength of the ordnance factory, it's possible to research it. In the future, we will build a large number of railway tracks. Let's start with Vietnam and Laos. When the time comes, we will build railways that extend in all directions. This way, whether it is the mobilization of troops or the transportation of goods, it will be greatly improved. At this time, Yang Qindong had already begun to imagine the appearance of a train with thick smoke running amok in his territory. It must be very spectacular. In this way, the transportation under his rule would be greatly improved. In the future, no matter where he went, not only would it greatly shorten the time, even if there was a problem, reinforcements would also arrive in the shortest time possible. It would also play a great role in promoting the security and stability of the forces and the allocation of goods. This was no longer a discussion, but an order. Feng Ke also knew that he was too anxious for success, so he nodded heavily. Yes, teacher, this student will immediately adjust the direction of the research. Yang Qindong was also very satisfied with Feng Ke's performance, but he didn't want to dampen his enthusiasm. After thinking for a while, he said, "How about this? The engineers who are researching the engine don't have to stop. I will get some small engines for you to use later." As he said this, Yang Qindong sighed in his heart. It's time to get some vehicles used by the army. Not only were there weapons and ammunition in the warehouse, there were also quite a few vehicles. There were even some very old military three-wheeled motorcycles. Relatively speaking, their manufacturing was simpler, and the structure of the engine was easier to imitate. It was suitable for the engineers to study. As for how to explain the appearance of these things, even tanks had appeared, so was there a need to be afraid that they wouldn't be able to explain it clearly? Small engines? Hearing this, Feng Ke's eyes lit up. He seemed to have thought of something, and couldn't help but ask in excitement, "Teacher, did you find something in the mountains?" Previously, in order to explain how the tanks and weapons and ammunition appeared, Yang Qindong had told Feng Ke and the others that they were all found in a mysterious mountain. After Yang Qindong had already told the students that this world didn't exist independently, and that it was likely that there were other high-tech civilizations, the students were no longer unfamiliar with the term UFO. The latter explanation was that these things found in the mountains were very likely products of other worlds, but they were accidentally forgotten in a certain mountain. Although it sounded ridiculous, at least it was an explanation. What was more important was that Feng Ke and the others believed him, which saved Yang Qindong a lot of time and effort. And just 3 days after the inspection of the munitions factory, more than a dozen military three-wheeled motorcycles, four-wheeled cars, and trucks appeared in the most heavily guarded tank test area of the munitions factory. Of course, these were all done in secret, and outsiders didn't know about it. Yang Qindong had long focused on other aspects. Under the company of Governor Yu Qian, they walked around the other factories for the past few days. At this time, other than the fact that there were no cars on the streets, Qian City was no different from a city during the Republic of China. Walking on the wide road, all kinds of carriages and rickshaws could be seen everywhere. On both sides of the road, all kinds of shops had sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain. For example, there were clothing stores, department stores, food stores, theaters, and hotels. They had everything that one could think of. Compared to the restaurants, inns, and silk shops of the outside world, it was like heaven and earth. Once an outsider entered here, it was like Granny Lou entering the Grand View Garden. Their eyes were not enough to take in everything. Among these outsiders was the Spanish merchant, also known as François Garcia. As the Kingdom of Spain was very developed in the maritime industry, when the sea route was continuously opened up by them, a large number of adventurous merchants set up fleets and began to travel everywhere. One after another, they discovered unfamiliar places and made a lot of money. Whenever these sea merchants appeared in a place, if they were strong and their opponents were weak, they would directly destroy and plunder them. If their opponents were strong, they would lower their noble heads and trade with them. While reaping huge profits, they would also think of ways to exploit your strengths and find your weaknesses to give you a fatal blow. Rather than saying that they were adventurers and merchants, it was more accurate to say that they were pirates of the sea. Garcia was one of the pirates. When the other merchants were still targeting the Western world, he had already braved the wind and waves to the east. Fortunately, he appeared in Qian City. After stating that he was a merchant of the Kingdom of Spain, he was allowed to enter the port and come to Qian City. Just like how the Western countries wanted to understand the Eastern world, Yang Xie's Navy Department also wanted to know about the outside world. After a few years of preparation, they didn't know how many ships they had sent, and they completely understood the terrain of the nearby seas. Now, they were stretching out even further. The arrival of merchants like Garcia was also welcomed by the Navy Department. Their arrival often brought a lot of information that they didn't know about. In this way, they could easily obtain more knowledge. After being welcomed by Yang Xie's navy, Garcia stepped into Qian City and his eyes were dazzled. Along the way from Spain, apart from a limited number of places, most of the areas gave him the impression that they were very poor. Apart from some nobles who were still living well, the ordinary people were too poor. He even saw a lot of cannibalism. In some places, he often only needed to pay the price of a meal to get the local people to do anything for him. After a long time, this feeling gave Garcia a sense of superiority. In his heart, although the world was very big, no one could be stronger than the Kingdom of Spain. Oh, maybe the Kingdom of England was also not bad, but their strength was only about the same. In this era, in the West, England and Spain were indeed the strongest. As for the other countries, they were either very weak or had yet to become independent. What's more, Xiaomei was not even born yet. With this kind of arrogance, Garcia thought that he was better than others, and looked at everyone as if they were country bumpkins. When he came to Qian City, he was really shocked. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have imagined that there was such a strong country on the other side of the sea. There was a straight and wide road here, a clean and hygienic environment here, a street lamp that was as bright as the sun here, a skyscraper that he had to raise his head to see the roof of the building here, in short, there were too many beautiful scenery here that he couldn't imagine before. More importantly, the economy here was very developed, and there were many things that he couldn't imagine. Chapter 1359. There were all kinds of luxurious clothes and silky fabrics that he had never seen before. There were all kinds of delicious food and drinks that he had never seen before. There was even wine that was unique to the West and had never been seen in the East. Living in a high-rise building with electric lights, with elevators that could be used to go up and down. It was beyond his imagination. Bicycles were everywhere, vans and carriages could be seen everywhere. What's more, it was very comfortable to sit on them, there wasn't any bumps at all. It was much more comfortable than the carriages of the nobles and even the royal family. Garcia was surprised, but at the same time, the ambition in his heart was ignited. He was thinking, if these good things were introduced to Spain, how much wealth would it bring him? With this goal in mind, he continued to work hard to achieve it. When the Navy sent someone to contact him, he was very enthusiastic, giving the impression that he knew everything, but only he knew what was true and what was false. While gaining the friendship of the navy, he also used the gold and silver he brought with him to go shopping in Resin City. At this time, the porcelain, tea, and silk that were praised by the West were no longer his goal. In his opinion, although these things were precious, as long as he had money, they could be bought. What he wanted the most now was something that only Resin City had, something that didn't exist in the outside world. For example, high-quality firearms and artillery that didn't seem to be large in size, but could exert great power. Naturally, it would be extremely difficult to take away such things. What he wanted was not the finished product, but the manufacturing blueprints. With these things, if he had enough raw materials, he didn't know how many finished products he could make. Recently, railed vehicles began to appear in Resin City, which made Garcia's eyes light up. He sent his most capable assistant, Anthony, to find a way to get the blueprints of the railed vehicles, and then he was ready to leave. After a few days of hard work, he had already obtained a bicycle, a military telescope, and the blueprints for a rocket launcher. With just these, he believed that he would be able to sell them for a sky-high price when he returned to his country. Then, he would think of a way to come back again. At that time, with enough gold and silver, his goal would be even greater. Sooner or later, he would take away all the good things in Crimson City. Then, he would use this spear to attack the shield. At that time, it would be possible for him to become the Crimson City Lord. This was a great goal. Although it was difficult, Garcia was determined to do his best to achieve it. He was also looking forward to that day. It was located in a roadside coffee shop, which was also a new thing recently. Because of the elegant environment, it gradually replaced some teahouses and became a new place that many fashionable people were willing to visit. Garcia chose a corner that few people paid attention to. From here, he could easily see everything that happened in the coffee shop, but it was difficult for others to notice him. After drinking a cup of coffee, he was still savoring the aroma in his mouth. Suddenly, the door of the coffee shop opened, and the tall, fair-skinned assistant, Anthony, appeared. Accompanying him was a middle-aged man wearing a traditional Chinese suit. He wasn't tall, but he already had a big belly. When the person entered the cafe, he had an arrogant look on his face. After looking around and spotting Garcia in the corner, he strode over with his feet splayed outwards. When he walked, he purposely put his hands behind his back. Fortunately, there were no other customers in the coffee shop at this time. Otherwise, it would be easy to recognize him as an official. The fat middle-aged man was indeed an official, and his position wasn't low. He was the director of the Commerce Department's External Relations Department, Lu Qing. When Garcia first came here, he was the first person he interacted with. His face was full of fat, and his small eyes were filled with greed. It was also because of his appearance that Garcia, who had met countless people along the way, gave him his first sum of money. After that, he received good treatment. For example, his accommodation was arranged by Lu Qing. Although he had to pay a hefty sum of money, it was very comfortable. Not only were there electric lights, but there was also 24-hour hot water and a comfortable sofa. It was almost unimaginable outside of Resin City. Garcia later asked around and found out that not all foreign businessmen could enjoy such treatment. Some of them had electric lights, but they didn't have 24-hour hot water or a sofa. Based on this, he knew that the money was worth it. As a result, he continued to send money to Lu Qing. After the two of them became familiar with each other, he got a lot of things that he wanted. When Garcia saw Lu Qing sitting down in front of him, a flattering smile appeared on his face. Then, he said in broken Chinese, "Director Lu, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Alright, you know I'm busy, so you don't have to be so courteous. Why don't you tell me what you want me to do here?" Lu Qing said impatiently. Garcia, who had interacted with him many times, was confident that he knew Lu Qing very well. This person was a greedy person who only cared about money. As long as the money was given, everything would be fine. Otherwise, he would immediately turn hostile. With a smile on his face, he gently took out a piece of banknote with the number 1000 written on it and placed it on the table. As soon as the banknote was taken out, Lu Qing's impatient expression immediately became much better. He first looked around, and when he found that no one was paying attention to him, he chuckled and put the 1,000 taels banknote into his pocket. Then, his tone became much friendlier. "Look, we are all old friends, how can I be so shameless?" Lu Qing took the banknote and Garcia's expression became much happier. "Yes, I'm friends with Director Lu, so I need your help." Garcia leaned forward and whispered something in Lu Qing's ear. Lu Qing, who originally had a smile on his face, quickly changed his expression. His brows furrowed together before he shook his head and said, "That thing isn't easy to obtain." "Yes, I know it's not easy, but what kind of person is Director Lu? There's nothing in Crimson City that can stop you. How about this, get the blueprint and I'll pay you this much." Garcia said and extended a finger. This finger was not 1,000 taels, nor was it 10,000 taels, but 100,000 taels. Seeing this, Lu Qing was stunned at first, but he quickly shook his head. "No, this is a serious matter. The blueprints of the railroad tracks are not so easy to obtain. In the middle, many people will be needed. This bit of silver is not enough." Garcia cursed Lu Qing's insatiable greed in his heart. However, when he thought of the value of this item and the benefits he would receive if he were to offer it to the King of Spain, he hardened his heart and extended another finger. "That's all. I don't have much left from the silver I brought this time." With the price of 200,000 taels, Lu Qing finally smiled. Sure. 3 days. We'll make the deal here 3 days later." "Okay." Garcia also knew that this item wasn't easy to get. It was all because of Lu Qing's ability that he could get it done in 3 days. Therefore, he happily nodded. Lu Qing left without even drinking a cup of coffee. To him, the coffee in this coffee shop wasn't bad, but it paled in comparison to the free coffee from the Department of Commerce. Not long after, Garcia and Anthony also left. Right after they left, the male waiter who was dozing off in the coffee shop suddenly opened his eyes. He immediately asked for leave from another waiter and strode out. No one knew that this waiter had another identity. He was an intelligence officer from the Security Bureau. His job as a waiter in the coffee shop was just a cover for his identity. After all, this was a high-class public place. There might be some private transactions happening here, so it was necessary to arrange for someone to be here. After leaving the coffee shop, this intelligence officer quickly went to the nearest intelligence station. He met with his team leader, Gu Qi, and told him about his findings and suspicions. From a certain point of view, the Security Bureau and the Central Intelligence Bureau were both part of the Yangtze's intelligence department. They were like the Great Ming's Imperial Guards and the Eastern Palace Guards. They had the responsibility of secretly monitoring hundreds of officials. Once they suspected someone, they could often arrest them without any evidence. They had a lot of power. After hearing his team members' report, Gu Qi didn't dare to be careless. This matter involved the director of the Department of Commerce, and there were even foreign businessmen involved. If he didn't handle it well, it would have a deep impact. The scope of this matter had exceeded his authority, so he had to report it. At first, Gu Qi found the deputy director, Dong Hui. Then, this matter was reported to Che Chao, the director of the Security Bureau in Qiqian City. Looking at the latest information on the desk, Che Chao waved his hand at Dong Hui and said, "I understand. Do what you need to do." Dong Hui knew that he had caught a big fish. He immediately retreated with a happy face. When there was no one in the office, Che Chao placed his hands in front of the telegraph on the table. After switching to a signal station, he began to report to the other side. The wired telephone was still being developed in the Academy of Sciences. It was said that it was about to succeed. Before this, the main leaders of the various departments used this simple transmitter to communicate. Although it was a bit troublesome, it was still much easier than walking out of the office to the destination. Chapter 1360. After Dong Hui left the director's office, he looked for Gu Qi and asked him to arrange for someone to follow Lu Qing. He needed to know what she had done in the past 24 hours, including what she had eaten and how many hours she had slept. He also needed to have a detailed tracking record. Gu Qi knew that it was time for him to perform a meritorious service. He immediately went out and called for a group of more than 10 people to follow and monitor Lu Qing. However, what made him a little disappointed was that Lu Qing's performance was very normal in these 3 days. Other than working normally in the department and reporting to Minister Chang Qianhao alone, he didn't have any contact with anyone else. Even when he was working, he was accompanied by his secretary. He rarely had any contact with anyone alone. Gu Qi was puzzled. Did he find out that he had sent someone to follow him? 3 days later, when he saw Lu Qing walk out of the Commerce Department and walk towards the coffee house at the designated time, he knew that he was not found out. However, something must have been overlooked. The informant was still lurking in the coffee house, but this time, Garcia was obviously on guard. His deputy, Anthony, actually stood up and blocked the informant's line of sight. In just a short while, Lu Qing had already left. As for what he had done with Garcia, what they had said, and even if they had traded anything, Garcia had no idea. The difference between the Security Bureau and the Daming East factory was that they couldn't arrest people without evidence. This was Yang Chendong's order. Obviously, he was also worried about making some unjust or false cases. After all, people still had to rely on people to do things, and people were selfish. He didn't want this department to be used by others to deal with their opponents. Without enough evidence, the informant did not send out the signal to take action in the coffee house. After Lu Qing, Garcia, and Anthony walked out of the coffee house, Gu Qi, who had been waiting outside, finally could not wait any longer. He entered the coffee house to understand the situation. After learning that he did not see whether the other party had traded anything, Gu Qi was in a dilemma. After all, this matter involved a director of the Commerce Department and a foreign businessman. If he acted rashly and made a mistake, the impact would be too bad. Following Yang Chendong's order, after the opening of Qiqian City's port, more and more merchants came to Qiqian City. Most of them were yellow-skinned, but there were also some white-skinned and black-skinned people. When these people arrived at Crimson City, they were first shocked by the prosperity of this place. Then, they felt a great business opportunity and spent money to purchase goods from Crimson City. At the same time, they also transported some of the ores that Crimson City needed. It was precisely because of the appearance of these sea merchants that the 5-star army needed for weapons and materials. Just based on this point, without any evidence, these merchants couldn't be casually arrested. If these people were all scared away, it would be a huge loss to Crimson City and Yangxia. Gu Qi, who couldn't make up his mind, didn't know what to do. Just as he was wondering if he should take another look, he received a piece of news that made him unable to sit still. Garcia had actually applied to leave the port with his fleet a day later, and it had been approved. Damn it, he's trying to escape. At this time, how could Gu Qi not see that Garcia was trying to escape? Now, it wasn't a matter of whether or not he had evidence. It was a matter of principle to prevent people from taking confidential information out of Qiqian City. If Garcia wanted to leave, he would definitely take away all the important things. That would be the best time to catch him red-handed. Without any hesitation, Gu Qi went straight to where his superior, Dong Hui, was at. Dong Hui also felt that this matter was very serious. After quickly consulting with Director Che Chao, he mobilized over 100 intelligence agents and decided to go to the port tomorrow morning. At the same time, he ordered Gu Qi to arrest Director Lu Qing at the same time tomorrow. However, because there wasn't enough evidence, it was best not to arrest someone in a public place like the office. Garcia didn't know that he was being targeted. He had successfully obtained the construction information of the railcar. Looking at the various neatly drawn numbers on it, he let out a long sigh of relief. With this item, this trip was worth it. With a smile on his face, Garcia could be said to be asking questions. He looked at his assistant, Anthony, and asked, "Have you informed the port?" "Yes, we have. Tomorrow morning, our ship will depart from the port and return to our country," Anthony replied respectfully. In their country, the difference in status between people was a huge gap. Even if the superior wanted you to die, you had to obey. "Very good. How about this, Anthony, you stay here tomorrow. Don't go back with me. Stay here and continue to keep an eye on this place. I feel that there should be a lot of secrets that we haven't unearthed yet. This important mission will be handed to you. I hope that the next time I come back here, I will hear more good news," Garcia said with a hopeful tone. Anthony didn't think about being left behind. When he heard this, his face was naturally filled with shock. However, when he understood the benefits, his face naturally revealed a joyful expression. He was only Garcia's assistant, and there wasn't much credit left for him, unless others were willing to share some of it with him. But no matter what, when there was a great contribution, people would only remember Garcia. How many people would remember him? If he could stay behind to carry out the mission alone, it would be different. The merit wouldn't be snatched away by others. Not to mention, this was Garcia's idea. He had to carry it out even if he didn't want to. "Yes, I'm willing to stay." "Very good. There are still some silver taels left for you. Go ahead and do it." Garcia patted Anthony's shoulder happily and said with a face full of excitement. The Intelligence Bureau finished setting up the surveillance very quickly. The reason why they didn't take action immediately was because they were afraid that if they acted too early, they would startle the opponent and lose the evidence they wanted. Therefore, when they all boarded the ship and were about to leave, it was the best time to take action. The next morning, Dong Hui brought over 100 operatives and waited outside the port early. A few scouts were using binoculars to observe the port. "How is it? How is it?" A few operatives seemed to have seen some commotion at the port from afar. They were afraid that someone would steal their merit, so they anxiously asked the scouts. "Leader, the Navy inspectors at the port are currently inspecting the Spanish ship that is about to leave the port. They have already found a telescope and 3 bicycles. Both sides are confronting each other." One of the scouts put down the binoculars in his hand and reported everything he had just seen seriously. A leader heard his subordinates report and said anxiously, "What? They have already found so many things. Won't the merit be taken away by them? This won't do." After speaking, he strode towards the place where Dong Hui was standing. Dong Hui was standing under a big tree under the protection of a few operatives. After hearing the leader's report, he only hesitated for a moment before replying, "There's no rush. Let's wait a little longer." Dong Hui was so confident because the other party didn't bring anything big with them during the last transaction. This was something that Gu Qi had already reported. Although he didn't know what it was, he believed that it definitely wasn't a telescope or a bicycle. These things should be more precious and should be hidden very well by the other party. It shouldn't be easily discovered. The deputy director wasn't in a hurry, so the leader could only go back and continue to wait. It wasn't until nearly half an hour later that the ship's horn sounded. The 5 Spanish ships were about to leave the port that the leader became anxious. How could they let them leave? Didn't they already find the contraband? A scout put away his binoculars and stood at attention. Garcia handed over the 5 Spaniards, saying that everything was done by them and had nothing to do with him. After paying a fine, the Navy inspection team let them leave. This scout not only had excellent eyesight, but he also knew how to read lips. Naturally, he understood everything that happened in the distance. The leader didn't doubt this answer. It was because of this that he quickly turned around and ran towards Dong Hui. Soon, Deputy Director Dong also became anxious. Then, he led hundreds of people and rushed to the port. This time, the marine inspection team didn't find anything important, so it was time for them to perform. Dong Hui was very anxious and even a little excited. If they found what they were looking for this time, not only would they make a contribution, but they would also be able to suppress the Navy inspection team. Just thinking about it made him feel very happy. However, before he could bring his men to the port, a group of cold front Navy soldiers had already blocked their way. "What are you doing? The Security Bureau is here to do something, get out of the way." Seeing that someone was blocking his way, Dong Hui's face was filled with anger, and his voice had a hint of roar. He received accurate information that there was something wrong with the Spanish fleet. At this time, not to mention the cold front Navy soldiers blocking his way, even the senior officers of the Navy headquarters couldn't stop him. With full confidence, he was about to continue to stride forward, but everything was stopped by the appearance of a figure. Dong Hui had to stop and stand in place. Fifth brother. Just opposite more than 100 people from the Security Bureau, a man in a gray tang suit walked out. His face was very calm, and even if one looked carefully, there seemed to be a smile on the corner of his mouth. But it was such a person. As soon as he appeared, the members of the Security Bureau stopped on the spot. Chapter 1361. Not because of anything else, but because the person who came was called Yang Wu, known as Brother Wu. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. You're really patient. By the way, where's Dong Hui?" Yang Wu said in his own voice unhurriedly. Dong Hui, who was called, immediately walked out of the crowd and came to Yang Wu. He stood at attention, reporting to Brother Wu. Dong Hui, Deputy Director of the Security Bureau in Crimson City, reporting for duty. Don't be fooled by the appearance of the Security Bureau. Once they received information, they even dared to investigate. Most of the time, the way they worked was not so gentle, and it was obvious that few people could buy face from them. However, Yang Wu was definitely an exception. Anyone could do something wrong and betray, but the servants of the Yang family were an exception. They were Bugnam of Gojoseon's most trusted people, and more often than not, they could make decisions on behalf of the king. This kind of person was also not someone the Security Bureau could afford to offend. Deputy Director Dong, I haven't seen you for a while. Well, why don't you come with me? By the way, you can dismiss these people first. Yang Wu recognized Dong Hui. No matter what, he was still a deputy director, and his rank was not low. Seeing that he had found the right person, he passed down the order, canceling the operation and taking him away. If it was someone else, they would inevitably doubt themselves when they heard this. Even if they encountered a problem, they would be scared to the point of peeing their pants on the spot. But Dong Hui believed that he had not done anything wrong to Bugnam of Gojoseon in his position, so he was not afraid. "Okay, I'll go with Brother Wu. Everyone else, go back to your posts." Dong Hui did not even hesitate and decided to do as Yang Wu said. That was because he completely trusted Yang Wu's character. But others did not think so, especially the action team leaders. They were not worried about the safety of the deputy director. If there was really a problem with the deputy director, it was not something they could solve with their involvement. They were now worried that once the Spanish ships left, they would not be able to catch up with them. Therefore, a few bold team leaders couldn't help but stand up and say, "Deputy Director, those ships are about to leave." This time, Dong Hui didn't have to answer. Yang Wu gave the answer, "Don't worry, they have already been inspected by the Navy inspection team, so there won't be any problems. You can now listen to Deputy Director Dong's order and disperse." Yang Wu even knew what they were looking for. This time, Dong Hui felt relieved. Since the other party had made things so clear, he must have been prepared. Dong Hui no longer had any doubts and said to Yang Wu, "I'll have to trouble you to lead the way, Brother Wu." "It's no trouble. Come with me." Yang Wu was very satisfied with Dong Hui's performance. He was neither anxious nor impatient, nor did he have any guilty conscience, which was enough to explain a lot of problems. He turned around and walked towards the city under the protection of a group of marine soldiers. Department of Commerce. Gu Qi had been waiting outside for more than an hour with the two groups that Dong Hui had chosen, as well as his own team members. Seeing that it was almost time for the arrest, but Director Lu Qing had no intention of coming out, he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. After all, there was not enough evidence to prove that there was a problem with Lu Qing. If he brought people to rush into the Department of Commerce and proved that the other party was innocent, who would bear the responsibility? He was afraid that as the team leader, he would be the first to be charged and punished. However, Deputy Director Dong Hui had already given the order that if he couldn't bring Lu Qing back on time, if something happened, he wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. After thinking about it, he finally decided to take the risk and arrest people in the Department of Commerce. In order to minimize their influence, Gu Qi only brought along 2 members who were good at fighting and left the rest outside. The 3 of them went straight to the Department of Commerce on the opposite side. After revealing their identities, Gu Qi and the other 2 walked into the building of the Department of Commerce without any obstruction. They came to the office on the 3rd floor with the sign of the Director of the Department of Foreign Liaison. Taking a deep breath, Gu Qi knocked on the door. When he heard the words, "Please enter," he pushed the door open and entered with his 2 team members. Gu Qi had already repeated the various actions after seeing Lu Qing countless times in his heart. He thought that it would be fine if the other party agreed, but if he didn't, he would have to use force to solve the problem. However, when he pushed the door open, his entire body froze. It was not for anything else, but because he saw 2 unrelated people in the office. More importantly, he couldn't afford to offend these 2 people. One of them was even his superior, the director of the Security Bureau in Qiqian City, Che Chao. The other person's status was not low either. He was the director of the Department of Commerce, Chang Qianhao. It was said that this person was one of the students that Bugnam of Gojoseon valued very much. In terms of status, he was probably even higher than their director. Mas. Director, Minister Chang. Gu Qi was already shocked speechless by everything in front of him, not to mention the 2 team members behind him, who were trembling all over. They didn't know what was going on. However, the 3 people in the office all had smiles on their faces. There was no need to talk about Lu Qing. Because of his fat, standing there without moving gave people the impression that he was smiling. However, their director Che Chao's face was also full of smiles at this moment. "Director Che, your subordinates are not bad." Although they were a little late, they still made a move. It seems that the name of our Department of Commerce is not enough to shock people. Chang Qianhao had a smile on his face and a hint of ridicule in his voice. It sounded like he was complaining. However, Che Chao was very clear about the cause and effect, so no one knew better than him whether this was praise or derision. He also smiled and said, "It's okay. It would have been better if they could have rushed in faster." Gu Qi was stunned by the words of the 2 big bosses. Just when he was at a loss, Che Chao and the other 2 had already stood up. When they passed by him, Che Chao's voice was heard. "Gu Qi, tell your people to leave. Do what you need to do. As for you, leave with me." Whether it was the dock or the Department of Commerce, all the arrangements were over before they started. However, this ending was just another kind of beginning. When the 2 sides finally gathered in front of the palace, Yang Wu, Chang Qianhao, Che Chao, and Lu Qing looked at each other and smiled. Only Dong Hui and Gu Qi were left with a confused look. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait for long. In a side hall of the palace, they saw the leader of Yangxia, Yang Chendong. Then, the two of them understood what had happened. It turned out that Lu Qing didn't contact Garcia personally, but was ordered by Minister Chang Qianhao. Like the telescope, the bicycle, they were all taken out to gain the other party's trust. The facts also proved that Garcia did indeed believe them, which also revealed his ambition. In his greed, he actually wanted the construction blueprint of the rail car, which was enough to show how big his ambition was. What was rare was that this secret was unexpectedly found out by the security bureau on the way, which led to these things. Yang Chendong sat directly at the top of the hall. Below him stood the deputy commander of the Navy headquarters, Gao Xiong, a group of Navy officers, and a group of army officers led by Leng Song. Of course, City Lord Yu Qian was also indispensable. He was the only person who had a seat, and he was also the one closest to Yang Chendong. Even if this was because Yu Qian was already very old, in his 60s, it was enough to show that Yu Qian was important in Yang Chendong's heart. Not bad, this time the security bureau reacted very quickly. Director Che, your soldiers are good, continue to work hard. Yang Chendong said in a good mood. Being praised by Yang Chendong in public, Che Chao was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He immediately said, "Yes, thank you 6th young master for your praise, we will continue to work hard." Yang Chendong nodded, then turned his gaze to Chang Qianhao and Lu Qing. Not bad, you used a good method to lure the snake out of its hole. This is what a student should do. Chang Qianhao was not so excited. Wasn't it supposed to be a student getting the teacher's approval? Yang Chendong nodded with a smile, then his gaze fell on the group of officers. His voice suddenly became sterner. You all see it, right? Danger is everywhere. Don't think that just because we are so powerful now, no one will dare to target us. Let me tell you, there is no lack of ambitious people in this world. In their eyes, there is no right or wrong. What they want to do is right. In their eyes, there is no strong or weak. They are the strongest. With such people, if you don't work hard, you are falling behind. Sooner or later, you will be surpassed, and you may even become a prisoner. The stern voice made the faces of Gao Xiong, Leng Song, and others become very ugly. However, they could not explain anything. They immediately lowered their heads and looked like they were admitting their mistakes. During this period of time, Yang Chendong had seen and heard some unpleasant things when he was inspecting the army. For example, the officers in the army were very arrogant, as if they were the number one in the world. In their eyes, they were the strongest army in the world. It was a good thing that they did not find trouble with others. No one would dare to find trouble with them. Self-confidence was a good thing, but arrogance was a bad thing. If they failed because they underestimated the enemy, the military officer would be held accountable. This involved how many people would die after losing the war, how many families would be separated, and how many people's happiness would be affected. Based on this point, Yang Chendong would not only punish them, but might even kill them. Based on Yang Chendong's understanding of the situation, the current Leng Feng army had this kind of arrogant mentality of underestimating the enemy. They believed that they had the most powerful firearms in the world, so they thought that they were superior and did not put any opponents in their eyes. Today, Yang Chendong decided to use this opportunity to remind the officers. If there were still people who did not recognize the reality, then he did not mind punishing some of them. It was better than losing soldiers on the battlefield and dying in battle. Chapter 1362. Leng Feng is strong because you have powerful firearms, the most scientific training methods, the nutritious meals that give you a good physique, and the unparalleled logistical support. But what if you lose these? If you also don't have enough to eat and carry broken weapons, how many more battles can you win? If we give you war horses, will you be able to defeat the 1st Cavalry Division? Can you? Yang Chendong's smile disappeared completely. When he looked at Leng Song and Gao Xiong, his face was cold. The two lieutenant generals were the first to lower their heads. The group of major generals behind them also hurriedly lowered their heads. At this moment, no one dared to meet Yang Chendong's gaze. Leng Feng wasn't that weak. Even if they didn't have powerful firearms, normal people wouldn't be their match even if they had swords. However, they were able to do this because of the special treatment they had received. The so-called special treatment referred to the most scientific training methods and the nutritious meals they ate. Leng Feng didn't need to worry about their daily lives. They had the best guarantee, whether it was food, clothing, shelter, transportation. Even their families benefited from it. Without any worries, the results of the training were naturally very obvious. But what if they lost all of this? How much of their fighting spirit could they achieve? Leng Feng's officers probably didn't know. Under the reprimand, all the generals lowered their arrogant heads. Many of them even broke out in a cold sweat. This was the effect Yang Chendong wanted. No matter what a person did, they had to have a string in their head. Without this string, they wouldn't have any fear. Their arrogance would grow and they would suffer a loss sooner or later. He didn't want to see Leng Feng suffer such a loss. Therefore, he had to hit them with this stick. Look, even a merchant knew how to make up for his weakness. He knew how to steal the good things in Suxian City for his own use. However, Leng Feng's officers were still arrogant. They thought they were the best in the world. If this continued, it would be strange if they didn't suffer a loss on the battlefield. After venting his anger, Yang Chendong's expression looked better. When he looked at the officers, his voice was no longer as harsh. Deputy Commander Gao, how's the map of the sea? Gao Xiong, whose name was called, shuddered. He took a step forward and said, "Sixth young master, the situation of the surrounding sea has been completely figured out. Now we have a detailed sea map of the surrounding 1,000 miles. If necessary, as long as the order is given, the navy can be dispatched and completely occupy this sea area." Gao Xiong was full of confidence when he said this. Over the years, the navy has rarely fought against foreign forces, but it's not like they didn't do anything. On the contrary, every time they patrol the sea, they try their best to perfect the sea map, including where there are reefs, where there are shoals, where is the most suitable place for landing, how long is the time difference between the appearance of typhoons, and so on. 1,000 miles? Far from enough. This answer didn't satisfy Yang Chendong. His goal was too far, so far that no one dared to think about it. Yes. Gao Xiong, who didn't receive any praise, trembled again. He could see that the sixth young master wasn't satisfied, but this was already the result of his best efforts. If he wanted to make the map more accurate and farther, he would have to deal with the fleets of other countries and get more information from them. However, at sea, the map was like the root of life. How could those people be willing to hand it over? He had tried to spend money to buy it, but unfortunately, the results weren't very good. With all kinds of worries in his heart, Gao Xiong didn't know what to do to satisfy the sixth young master. However, before he could express his difficulties, Yang Chendong, who was sitting at the head of the table, had already spoken. There are some things that we can't do on our own. If we can't do it, we can ask others for help. Things that can be done with money are naturally the simplest. If it can't be done, we can use force. There are still many people in this world who cherish their lives. If the whole Yangtze was not very rich because of its rapid development, then the navy didn't have so many worries. They controlled this part of the sea, and every time they went out to sea, they would bring in a lot of income. Especially after they listened to Yang Chendong's order and began to catch fish in the sea, their income was second only to the existence of the Ministry of Commerce. Needless to say, the Ministry of Commerce. Since ancient times, traveling merchants have been the most profitable industry. In addition, Yangtze has produced so many new things. Every time something appears, it will attract the attention of merchants from other countries. Yang Xie's goods never cared about the price, it only cared about whether they could get the goods or not. As long as a merchant can get the goods, they would make a lot of money. For this reason, the days of the Ministry of Commerce were naturally very good. Every year, they would also pay a large amount of business tax to the city lord's office, allowing them to do whatever they want. In addition to them, the second in line was the navy. Unlike the rewards the army received after winning a battle, sometimes even if they won a battle on the ground, they still wouldn't be able to get anything useful. After all, humans were still too poor right now. The sea was completely different. Every time they went out to sea, they could bring back a large number of seafood from the sea. After processing, they would be transported to various places to be sold. That was an endless amount of silver. For example, the matter of catching whales. Due to their enormous size and their entire bodies being treasures, every time one was caught, the profit would be at least 100,000 taels of silver. And this was when they were directly sold to the Ministry of Commerce. If they were sold to other places through the hands of merchants, the profit would be immeasurable. And just this transaction alone made countless people jealous. But everyone knew what was going on, and no one else could do it. The size of the whale was not something that ordinary ships could deal with. Doing such an exclusive business was naturally as satisfying as it could get. Yang Chendong said to find other people to help and use money to buy the route map because the navy didn't lack money. Then he said to use force, which immediately made Gao Xiong's eyes light up. Sixth young master, using force is naturally the best way, but in this way, I'm afraid that others will know our purpose, and I'm afraid that some places will be guarded. Guarded? Humph, can a dead man still speak? Yang Chendong's mouth slightly raised, and he coldly snorted. He never thought that he was very benevolent. In his previous life, in order to complete various tasks, he didn't know how many people he killed. Of course, the people he killed were people who deserved to die in his eyes. But if someone wanted to obstruct his great cause of unification, who didn't deserve to die? Not to mention that they were of different races. Not my race, my heart must be different. Gao Xiong understood the meaning of Yang Chendong, and his eyes flashed with light. Sixth young master, this subordinate understands. Please rest assured that the Navy will immediately implement your instructions. The Navy will not be an obstacle to our expansion. Very good. Yang Chendong's face finally looked better, and then he said something that made everyone present excited. This king has decided to start the expansion of the sea in March next year. The Navy will be the main force, and the Army will be the auxiliary force. The implementation will still be the same as on land. Every time we occupy a place, we will relocate the people there. In short, we must put the 5-starred flag in every corner of the world as soon as possible. At that time, everyone must give their full support. Yes. Everyone present understood the meaning of Yang Chendong in an instant, and one by one, they answered in an excited voice. After talking about the military, Yang Chendong's eyes fell on Che Chao, Dong Hui, and Gu Qi. He knew that they should have a lot of questions in their hearts. Qianhao, you say it. Yes. The Minister of Commerce, Chang Qianhao, cupped his fists and stepped forward. Then, he recounted the entire story of Garcia's incident. According to Chang Qianhao, Director Lu Qing went to contact the Spanish businessman Garcia under his orders. The so-called bicycle and binoculars were just chips to gain the other party's trust, including the rail car blueprint that was traded with the other party in the end. Now, this person should have taken those blueprints to the sea and is on his way back to Spain. The marine inspection team appeared and detained the telescope and the bicycle, but they only took away the railcar blueprint. For Yang Xie, there was no loss. The reason why he did this was to send a friendly signal to Garcia. They are all friends and will not meet on the battlefield. Now it seems that the goal has been achieved. So that's how it is. This was also the first time Che Chao had heard of such a thing. Feeling that he had understood everything, he immediately smiled and said, "In that case, the blueprint that Director Liu gave the other party must be fake." He, not only did you get the money, but you also gave the other party an illusion without any losses. Well done. No. Chang Qianhao smiled and shook his head. The blueprint is real. If not, how can we let the other party see our friendship? What? It's real? Then this. Che Chao's face turned ugly. If all of this was real, in his opinion, the sacrifice was too big. Fortunately, Yang Chendong spoke at this time. It's nothing. Even if there is a blueprint, some things can't be built so quickly. Just the iron smelting alone is enough for them to prepare for a period of time. Of course, if they can really build it, wouldn't it be better? It would save us some trouble. When these words were said, everyone was stunned at first, but then they suddenly understood and nodded. Yes, the navy is about to expand on the sea. One day, Spain will become a part of Yangtze. If they have any scientific results, wouldn't it help the entire Yangtze? You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.